It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in College Baseball Central fans. Welcome to 2025. We took a little bit of a hiatus during the holiday season with these kind of deep dive recaps, and boy, did it end up working out perfectly. We have LSU as our first one in 2025. For those that don't know, we've already been doing them in alphabetical order, ranking the teams as we go. So just because you don't see your team ranked doesn't mean that they're going to be near the bottom or anything like that. It is strictly alphabetical order. Obviously, I'm Jake McKeever with College Baseball Central. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Obviously, we always start off for those new fans with kind of some of the opinion pieces that are mine, and then towards the end is when we kind of get into the deep dive meat and potatoes. Obviously, LSU last season, they were the defending national champions in 2023. 2024, they were replacing Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz, two guys who went at the very, very top of the MLB draft. They brought in some guys from the portal. Jay Johnson was kind of heralded as the portal king. And like most teams that really build off the portal that don't have that kind of strong leader like Dylan Cruz was for that team that was so portal heavy before, they really kind of struggle to kind of mesh. Yes, they have Tommy White, who I think is going to go down as one of the most memorable college baseball players maybe ever. I think he's going to be in Tiger fans' lore for a long, long time after he hit that clutch home run. He was the leader, and it was definitely a lot of people that had some sophomore slumps. Gavin Guidry, who was tremendous for them his freshman year, at times really struggled with command. Pitching coach Nate Yeske came over from Texas A&M too. There was a lot of growing pains around that one. Thatcher Hurd really struggled. But at the end of the day, they really figured it out late. They were a competitive team in the SEC tournament. They got put in a tough regional with a talented UNC team, a team that ended up making it all the way to Omaha and going on a little bit of a run in Omaha too as well. LSU really took them down to the wire, and it took everything UNC had in order to beat this LSU team. So the sky really is the limit for this team going forward. It'll be interesting to see because the powerhouse of college baseball always seems to be at the top. First things first, here is how I rank the SEC stadiums. I have been to Alex Box Stadium, and I want to clarify something on this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for it being behind Kentucky Proud Park. It needs to be renovated. The Marucci Center out there in right field is tremendous. But outside of that, the stadium itself really kind of left me wanting more. LSU is the pinnacle of college baseball, and it feels weird to say because the stadium is so new. It doesn't really match up with some of these other SEC stadiums. I have it behind Plainsman at Auburn. I have it behind Baum Walker, as well as Kentucky Proud Park. LSU fans have this place as probably one or two, but the facilities outside of that Marucci Center are pretty dated, and I'm really excited to see LSU kind of invest in this and make this one of the best stadiums. Because I think LSU has the money and the potential and the buy-in to have the best stadium in the SEC. They really just need to kind of go out and show it. Moving on from a uniform standpoint, I'm going to be honest, I am not the biggest fan of LSU's uniforms. I love the purple and gold. I love the Tiger pinstripe script. I get the history behind the yellow jersey, why they wear it. I'm just not a big fan of the block lettering. I think the gray look that they have with the LSU patch is really kind of a tough look to pull off. Obviously, these aren't bad uniforms or anything like that. They got those awful, awful Nike sets at the beginning of last year. You can kind of see Jay Johnson down there in the bottom left. When I saw LSU in person at Minute Maid Park, that was the worst college baseball uniform I think I've ever seen. But LSU uniforms are kind of in that B tier for me. The gold's moving into an S tier, but outside of that, there really isn't a lot of exciting looks. Now into more of the meat and potatoes of this. Here is LSU's schedule for weekend series. Obviously, they're going to play Nichols twice. They're going to play the University of Louisiana, or if you're an LSU fan, the University of Louisiana Lafayette, as they kind of have a lot of beef going back and forth there. But it is a tough schedule. So they open up with Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne. That one's going to be a gimme. The University of Omaha, another kind of gimme. Then they head to Frisco for the College Classic, where they'll play against a really kind of talented Sam Houston team, and then the University of North Alabama. So we really won't know a lot about this team until that 5th week of the year, just because Missouri obviously is going to be near the bottom. They travel to Austin. For LSU fans that remember, Gavin Dugas had that memorable top of the ninth home run on that national championship team. It was probably one of the better hits and better midweeks we had seen in a while. That's going to be really a prove-it series for both of those teams, as we'll get to see a barometer of Texas and the SEC, as well as how talented this LSU team is. I think they do have a tremendous amount of talent, but that first 5 weeks, I would be really surprised if they have more than 2 or 3 losses in there. Obviously, they play Mississippi State. I think that's probably going to be one of the series of the year. Mississippi State beat LSU on that national championship team the last time they were at Alex Box Stadium. And then they beat them, I believe, last year too as well. Had 2 Oklahoma and then 2 Auburn, 2 places where you're really going to have to be cohesive. That's going to be a tough part of that schedule there. Alabama, I think, is going to be a little bit of a pesky team. LSU should take care of business at home, but you never really know with Alabama. Then that Tennessee series again, another marquee series and that backstretch. Tennessee at home, going to Texas A&M, a place that actually LSU has really excelled at, surprisingly, as they took a series from them last year. The year before that, in the national championship, they took 2 of 3 from them. That was actually the last time I saw Chase Shores pitch too as well, as we'll get into that here in a little bit. Then Arkansas and at South Carolina. So they have a lot of very winnable road series. They're going to get tested a ton. It is a very difficult schedule in the SEC. Obviously, every single schedule in the SEC is. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how LSU navigates this going forward. But again, I think that they're going to have an RPI that's very near the top of the country. Obviously, everybody's favorite segment with my bad editing skills that I never seem to get the highlights right. This is what LSU is replacing. They're replacing a Friday night guy in Luke Holman, who came over from Alabama. They are replacing Gage Jump. I know that is a very small text, so I do apologize for that. I will tweet out the graphic. Sunday, they love to go with kind of that opener for them. And we'll kind of talk about who was in that midweek role that really kind of never took over that Sunday role. Outside of that, Sam Dutton started a few of those games for him. He's now gone. Nate Ackenhausen is another one that started in that kind of open role. He's now in the MLB draft. Thatcher Hurd is another one that is now gone for LSU. So they are replacing 10 of their 12 pitchers. We'll kind of talk about who is going to carry that load for them. From a lineup standpoint, they bring a ton of guys back, but there are a few guys that I think are going to be missing in the LSU lineup this year. Obviously, Tommy White is going to be gone. We already talked about him. Stephen Milam's back. Jared Jones is surprisingly back. Pearson's back. Braswell is back. Brady Neal is gone as he is now at Alabama. Hayden Travinsky is gone as he aged out. And it came after the Pavia situation, so he is done. Mac Bingham's another guy that is gone. Paxton Kling down there, I missed him too. He transferred out too as well. Jake Brown, Ashton Larson, Ethan Frey are going to be guys that are back. So they lose Tommy White. They've had such an influx of talent leave in the past few years of this program. They had a tremendous class. He's got a few of these guys that won national championships, a few of these guys that came in as highly heralded freshmen. There's going to be a lot of chances for this LSU team to really kind of succeed as we kind of jump into it. But before we go into that lineup, here is where I have LSU ranked from a pitching standpoint. Obviously, Arkansas, I think, is far and away the best pitching staff. I already talked ad nauseum about them. I have them at 2. I have them ahead of Florida. I have them ahead of Auburn. I have them ahead of Georgia, ahead of Kentucky, and as well as Alabama. There are, like I said, they're replacing 10 of their 12 pitchers. There's some question marks around this LSU team. Obviously, the guy who I think is going to be the Friday night guy is Chase Shores. I got to see him as a freshman all the way back in 2023 when they played in that College Station Regional, and he basically lived around 100. Obviously, he's coming back from an injury. He at time had the walk bug, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how Nate Yeske pairs with him, as I know he's really worked well with pitchers that kind of struggle to find the zone. Nate Yeske and Chase Shores' relationship, I think, is going to be one thing to track here. When I saw him in the fall, he was around 93, 95. Obviously, he's ramping up, but that does kind of give me a little bit of a concern just because he regularly lived around that 100-mile-per-hour mark. He's going to be somebody that I expect that LSU is going to lean on a ton. I have him as a Friday night horse. Obviously, there's a ton of question marks as you never know how guys are going to come back from injuries, but Chase Shores has the talent and he has the prep career to prove. I think he's going to be one of the Friday night guys. From there, it really, really is a lot of unknowns here. Anthony Iacin is who I kind of project to be the Saturday guy. He has a ton of hype coming in around him, coming over from UC San Diego. Was personally my favorite under-the-radar portal guy from a mid-major coming over. Team USA guy. He made 9 starts last year. He came out of the pen. He's a guy that I could see Jay Johnson using as kind of like a 4th starter on a weekend where he comes in, pitches 6-7 innings over the course of a weekend and really kind of takes a lot of the load off the bullpen. Obviously, LSU has a deeper bullpen, so it'll be interesting to see kind of how Jay uses him. 190 opponent's batting average, so he does have some truly, truly electric stuff. From there, I think the Sunday guy is going to be freshman William Schmid coming over. He had first-round money from LSU, and he turned it down, removed his name from the draft very, very early. 98-mile-an-hour fastball, but his best pitch, I think, is that curveball that sits around 83, 85, super, super high RPM. It sweeps more as a 12-6, so it's a true, true curveball. Obviously, he has a changeup, which is a underrated aspect as a freshman. As a lot of them come in with 2 pitches and really try to work on that third one. He's going to be one that I think is going to be great for LSU going forward. I expect him to be in that Sunday role. It's elite stuff, and if he can unlock some of the training as he is kind of a lanky pitcher, bigger pitcher, I think he has the potential to move into a Saturday role by the end of the season. That's who I expect to move into that Sunday role. From there, there's 2 guys that are under the radar transfers coming in that have weekend experience. Jacob Myers is coming over from Thibodaux, Louisiana at Nicholls State, just right down the road. He's logged a ton of innings in college. Obviously, he was a lot better in his freshman year. Last year, he had a higher ERA. He pitched in some meaningful games for them in that regional. I should mention, too, that his opponent's batting average really didn't go up that much. So I think it's not necessarily a luck thing, as he is a lot better than his ERA. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him be in a weekend spot, weekend rotation, as again, he has some of that pedigree. Zach Cohen is another guy coming over from Wofford. He was the best pitcher on a team that definitely overachieved. Watched the Mercer game that he pitched, which was the game of his life. Legit stuff. Attacks hitters, pounds the zone, isn't afraid to go after them. He had double-digit Ks 3 times a season in that Mercer one. He had a lot of swing and miss stuff. The contact that he did allow was really, really weak. He's thrown 2 hitters throughout the year. He is an absolute workhorse, too, that can get stretched out and pitch into as much as he should do. And then lastly, I've seen a lot of guys kind of circulated, like D1 Baseball, a few 11.7 guys. Cade Anderson as being a guy who's going to be in a weekend rotation. He was their midweek guy last year, which really kind of worries me a little bit just because they went with openers at so many times, the whole thing with Thatcher Hurd. Obviously, I don't think he was ready last year to be in a weekend rotation. That's why Jay Johnson didn't use him there. I've heard that he's taken tremendous steps forward. He's had an absolutely monster fall, having a lot of swing and miss stuff. So Cade Anderson is another guy that you could kind of be in that starting pitching rotation. We've also heard Gavin Guidry has been stretched out too as well. Again, we talked about him at nauseum earlier. Electric stuff. Probably one of the most mature freshmen I'd ever seen. Super arrogant in a good way. Got roughed up, especially that Arkansas series. He really kind of was down on himself. But the last month of the season, Gavin Guidry was electric. He had a he won 2 games. He had a 2.53 ERA. He throws 4 pitches. He's focusing on pitching. I know that last fall there was some murmurs about him being a shortstop and how much that kind of affected him too as well. Super competitive. Had an ERA under 1 in the fall. So I don't think he's going to be a starter. But again, Jay Johnson did stretch him out as well. From there, I think that's going to be a lot of the guys that they kind of have that are really going to get a lot of these meaningful innings for them. 2 guys I want to mention that are coming up kind of in the pipeline for him. 2 freshmen that absolutely look like freshmen in every sense of the word. I watched some of their perfect game stuff from last summer, so I haven't really seen what they've looked like this fall. Cooper Williams was committed to A&M forever. 6'4" guy from Alvin, Texas, who I got to see pitch last spring. Super electric stuff. I think he had double-digit Ks when I saw him. Long rotation. Reminds me of Steven Matz. He's going to be someone that I'm really excited to see how he does in a college pitching program, how he attacks hitters, adds a little bit more muscle. He is a plus curveball and throws in the 90s from the left side. Just a stereotypical lefty in a good way. I think he's going to be somebody that's fighting for a weekend rotation spot in 2026. If he was at any other school other than LSU or some of these SEC schools, he would likely be an ace for him. I think that's the stuff how good is. Maverick Rizzi is another guy coming over from Washington. He's a 6'9" guy, super, super long, super, super lanky. He almost short arms the ball. So I think if Nate Yeske can kind of work on some of his mechanics, unlock his potential, because he looks really good with some kind of bad mechanics. So if Nate Yeske can kind of get his mechanics a little bit figured out, I think that the sky is the limit. Obviously, there's a few bullpen arms that I missed, William Schmid, a few other guys, again, but there is a lot to like about this LSU team. Obviously, they have 6 or 7 guys, if you kind of include Guidry, that could be in the mix for a starting role. So anytime that happens, the 3 best, it's really sink or swim time for those. You get the best out of it at that situation. That's what we saw on that national championship team, is guys really struggled for innings because you had guys just completely shorten games. I think that that's going to be the formula for LSU this season. They don't have as deep of a bullpen as Auburn, Georgia, Florida, but the high-end stuff, these guys can just absolutely eat innings. Whereas Auburn, Georgia, you really kind of worry that after they get outside of 2 innings, LSU doesn't have that problem. Every one of those 6 guys that I mentioned can throw 5-6 innings in a weekend. And again, they're going to do great, great things at LSU. Moving on into the projected lineup, I'm going to be honest with you, there was a lot of stuff about this. Jay Johnson has an embarrassment of riches. I know that freshmen coming in and starting, you never kind of always hold your breath on it because you don't know where they're going to be starting. Catcher, if you would have told me last summer what LSU's biggest weakness is, I would have probably said catcher. And it really is going to be a strength of this team. They get Luis Hernandez, who's coming over from Indiana State. He played first for them, but he was a Gold Glove lover first baseman. Everything I've read is that he is a good catcher. Righty bat, right-handed throwing, obviously because he's a catcher. He's had a tremendous fall as well. Longer swing. So that's going to be something that see if it translates into the SEC. But super mature approach, mature bat. He's going to be somebody that's really going to be pushing for playing time. Blaze Priester is a catcher too as well. I think he can play first. But just what a redemption arc for him. And he's somebody that you really do have to root for. Highly recruited guy, committed to LSU in that 2022 team, goes to Meridian Community College for 2 years, dominates, balls out, perfect game, All-American, hits 377 with 14 home runs, goes back to LSU, has an absolutely monster fall for them, led the team in home runs for this fall at 7. He's a guy that has a ton of pop, a long leg kick swing. Reminds me almost of like an Elijah McNamee from Mississippi State type of swing. I could see him being the catcher. I could see him being a DH because the bat plays so well. And then lastly, highly recruited recruit coming out of Tomball, Texas, Cade Arabidi. I believe that is how you pronounce it. He's had a tremendous fall. He's a really talented recruit. He's another guy that I got to watch in the playoffs for Texas baseball. Actually, it wasn't the playoffs. It was a regular season game against Klein Kane. He looked really good, had a mature lineup. Didn't get a chance to see him throw down outside of – in game, as everything I saw was between innings and stuff like that. So I can't really speak on his arm strength. From the stuff I've read about him, he is a very big, strong-armed catcher. The bat plays really good. The hit that I saw, he took the opposite way. So he's got a mature approach. If you can see that in a high school game, I think that's going to be one. It's going to be interesting, though. Last year, Jay got a little bit of a pass with the busy catching room because Brady Neal was left-handed. They had a few guys platoon. All these guys are right-handed. I didn't pull any of the righty-lefty stats on Hernandez, but I assume he's better against left-handed hitting. So do you see some of these guys be DHs? Do you see kind of one of these guys move to first? And that is kind of a good transition into first base. Bear Jones is coming back for a year. Everybody kind of thought he was going to get drafted as he was a draft-eligible sophomore. The money just didn't line up from a draft standpoint. He was drafted, but he's going to be back at LSU. And a lot of times when you have these guys that kind of hang around, stay at the program, you almost kind of want them to not necessarily leave, but it really kind of does hurt your development. That does not seem to be the case with Bear Jones. Obviously, these draft-eligible sophomores, Jay Johnson talked about it a few years ago that you blink and you kind of miss these kids. Jared Jones is going to get his full 3 years. That was the LSU plan when they recruited him. I think he's going to be the first baseman, but I want to put an asterisk that he is going to be in the lineup. There's no competition but there is a slight one, as they did have him take reps at third base, just because some of those catchers could play their way into being first base. The drop off from Jared Jones to Tommy White, I don't think will be that significant. I know that it wouldn't be the ideal third baseman, but that means those catchers are hitting really good and moving them to first. Obviously, he hit 3 home runs with 28 home runs. I expect him to have a better season. I expect him to eclipse that 30 mark. His biggest knock his freshman year was he couldn't hit left-handed pitching. Really worked on it a ton in the cage, and was one of the best hitters against lefty pitching. Stayed on a lot of the curveballs for lefty and drove it out. He's someone that I'm really excited to see how he's excelled, because he had such a big jump from his freshman to his sophomore year. Another guy that I mentioned I think should be kind of the future too as well, and a really underrated guy who I kind of fell in love with when I was doing this deep dive, Eddie Yaman Jr., coming over from the University of Dayton, played and started for Dayton as a true freshman, got insanely hot down the stretch in conference play as he rose his average from 213 to 342 in 6 weeks, hit 13 home runs on the season, short swing, ton of pop. He's going to be somebody that you could kind of have a change of pace guy, could maybe be a pinch hitter for them. But I absolutely love Eddie Yaman Jr. I wish he has a chance to play for this LSU team. That's how much I really like him. Then from there, the 3 infield spots, I really kind of do feel like it's 4 guys for 3 spots. Obviously, if Bear plays third, it's going to be 4 guys for 2 spots. Monster Milam's back. He had, for lack of a better term, a monster postseason for them. He dyed his hair super crazy. He was hitting all these clutch home runs. They have had him take a ton of reps at shortstop here in the fall, so expect him to kind of move over to shortstop. He was a tremendous fielder, really kind of short second base arm. I think as he kind of makes that transition to shortstop, it won't be too much of a transition. Obviously, he's not going to have a Jordan Thompson shortstop cannon that he unloads it, but I do think he is a little bit of a defensive upgrade over Braswell. And that really isn't a knock on Braswell. I just think that Milam gets rid of the ball so quick. And Braswell, I think, stands to benefit to play third. Again, I think that Braswell is going to win that job at third base, as it really kind of comes down between Braswell and those catchers moving him over to third base. I think that'll be a more comfortable spot for him. Obviously, at shortstop, he doesn't have the greatest range, but it seems like he always makes routine plays, which, again, for LSU from that 2024 team, that was kind of the opposite of Jordan Thompson, as you always kind of held your breath, but he made these incredible plays. I mean, Braswell's not going to win a Gold Glove by any standard, but he's going to have an insanely high fielding percentage. He's not going to make a ton of errors. You know what you're getting with this bat. It's a very consistent SEC bat, because if you remember correctly, when LSU was struggling, Michael Braswell was the best hitter on this team. He has the talent to be a leadoff guy for this LSU team, but again, he's also, with how crowded it is, has a chance to be not playing. And I think that just speaks to a testament to how deep this team is that with Michael Braswell, his high-low is just all over the place. Another guy that really is another heralded guy, Daniel Dickinson, is coming over from Utah Valley University. Insanely recruited kid. A ton of SEC schools wanted him, and he had visits playing with him. But Jay Johnson did the old Paul Skeens, where Paul takes one visit, Paul falls in love, Paul calls the other schools, cancels all of his visits. That's what he did. Jay Johnson has the Portal King nickname because he's able to get guys like Daniel Dixon to transfer over to his school. He's going to be the guy that probably plays second base for them. He's a high motor guy. Jay Johnson compared him to Pete Rose. He's a guy that just really absolutely loves the game. Everybody kind of raves about him. He basically just lives at the facility, almost like Alex Bregman did when he was at LSU. Team USA guy. He reminds me a ton of Justin Bench from Ole Miss with his swing and his stance and his power. He has a very underrated power set. And I think he has the ability to have double-digit home runs for this LSU team. The dark horse, I think, in this competition is Tanner Reeves coming over from Blinn. He is the lefty bat that LSU is going to be searching for, because I'd have to double-check on Dixon, and I can do that right now to see if he bats right-handed or left-handed. But everybody else in this is right-handed. So that's going to be one thing to really kind of track, is everybody is so far in the infield right-handed as it pulls up Daniel Dixon's. Tanner Reeves is a left-handed hitter. He played right field, batted leadoff on that Blinn National Championship team last year. Daniel Dixon is a right-handed pitcher. So if you're looking at these competitions, him and Milam are going to be the only two that could be lefties. He has a ton of pop. He has a winning pedigree. He's a guy that you really can kind of plug and play anywhere. I think Jay's going to be hard-pressed to leave out somebody like Tanner Reeves out of the lineup just because he kind of pushes for playing time. He's a guy that loves to kind of just play the game. And then moving on, and that's a great transition as Tanner Reeves, like I said, can play outfield, can play a corner infield spot. This outfield is just absolutely loaded. Aston Larson is back for them. Josh Pearson and Ethan Frey, three guys that started very, very meaningful games for them. Brady Neal also started a few in left field, which was, I think, a little bit strange. But all three guys have the potential to not be starting again this year, which is almost unheard of at LSU, that they have incumbent starters, guys that are coming back. Pearson hit 244, obviously slashed 352 and 442. Ethan Frey really struggled, 228, 292, 281. Jay basically said their jobs were safe with the amount of recruiting that he's came in behind him. They brought in a ton of talented guys behind them. And like I said, I think one or two of these are a safe bet to start, but definitely not all three. Chris Stanfield's a guy that's coming over from Auburn. He hit really, really tremendous for them, was really kind of a cog in their machine behind Ike Irish. He's a super, super rangy, athletic guy that I think could play in the corner. He's a high average guy, SEC experience, that's going to be pushing for playing time. Guys that transfer from SEC schools that started don't transfer to sit on the bench. They transfer because they're elite guys that are betting on themselves, and that's kind of the mantra I have with Chris Stanfield. It's going to be hard to kind of leave him out of this lineup. And then the one that's just making headlines around everything with LSU, every single thing, that article that I read about fall ball, it was Derek, I think it's Carell. I do apologize if I mispronounced that name. Derek Carell, stud freshman who had a tremendous fall. He was drafted last year, turned down the money to go to LSU. Common thing with Jay Johnson. He's a guy who hit at the very top of the lineup for LSU. I think he's going to be the everyday center fielder because that's usually what the fall tells you is the guys at the top are started. 2023, played in the All-American game, really kind of flashed. Lanky guy, fat. And again, I wrote fast 3 or 4 times because that was the one thing that really jumped out to me when I watched the film. He will need to add a little bit of muscle. But again, he is just so fast, so lanky. It almost looks like he's playing on like a 12U field with how fast he gets around the bases. Quote from Jay Johnson, he's really separated himself in the outfield. Carell is consistently impacting the game on both sides of the ball. I can always trust him to kind of make plays in the outfield. He's going to be one that I think Jay's really fallen in love with. And then Dalton Beck coming over from the University of Incarnate Word. He's another guy who I got to see who has tremendous pop. I think he's going to struggle to find meaningful at-bats just because this LSU team is so loaded. But he's a guy that realistically could be one of the 3 that starts. I don't think any of these guys will be in a DH role. I think it's going to be 3 guys that play. I think that this is where we'll see the most flexibility from Jay Johnson. I think that this is where we'll see the most guys kind of being able to prove themselves. I think once he gets that infield set and once he decides what he's going to do with Bear Jones, obviously if somebody slumps, people come out. But I think that infield's going to be set. I think catcher's going to move and rotate a lot with that catcher DH first base. And then I think these outfielders are going to have a ton of chances to go in and win these jobs. Again, it's going to be very interesting as this LSU team has a ton of talent. They have a ton of pieces in place to be a really successful team. Obviously, if they can put it all together, that will be the question for them. Here is the SEC teams ranked. I have LSU from a talent index at 3. Sorry if the numbers just didn't port over. Arkansas is still our number 1. Florida, I have ahead of LSU. I actually have them 5th in our top 25 rankings. LSU, I have them 3rd. Georgia, Kentucky, Auburn, Alabama kind of rounded out behind them. For reference, I have Auburn as a ranked team. I have Kentucky as a ranked team. I have Georgia as a ranked team. So 6 of these 7 teams in the SEC I have ranked very, very high. So just because LSU is 3rd in the SEC, they're likely going to be – I had them in an 8 to 12 range. I believe I had them at 12th behind some of the other teams just because I think that they bring a lot more back. LSU has a ton of question marks. They have a ton of good question marks. Again, if you're sitting here saying there's 15 or 16 guys that could play, it doesn't mean that they're fighting to try and find guys to play and scraping and clawing for that nice spot. It's the complete inverse. LSU is going to be uber talented. I'm really excited that I get to see them this year. I'm going to try and make it out to Alex Box again as I went last time. I am good luck for LSU fans. So LSU fans that are kind of roasting me for having them low. Every time I come, LSU wins. I've never seen LSU lose at the box, and that includes tournaments. So that's where I have them. And what does third place get you in the SEC? This is the chart that I have for them. Obviously, their low point, if everything goes bad, it's a 2 seed. I don't see with the pitching talent that they have, as well as the lineup that they have, how they missed the tournament, how they are not in the conversation to host. I just don't see it. They have so many guys that if guys slump that they can mask. It's not like if Thatcher Hurd struggles to be your Sunday guy, you're having to do openers. They're meat and potatoes, SEC bye. Obviously, with the new tournament schedule, that probably means that you're in the hosting conversation, if not a top 8 seed. I think LSU is going to be in that top 8 seed discussion. And the high point is the national runner-up. I don't see LSU winning the national championship this year. And I know that feels weird to say because I just talked about how talented they were. I just don't think that they're going to have all the magic and that they had in that 2023 team. So I have them being able to play for the national championship. They remind me a ton of that Florida team that played for the national championship that LSU beat. Tons of talent. It just seems like there's a few teams that have a little bit more talent. LSU fans, please don't kind of clip that if they end up winning the national championship. If they end up winning the national championship, I'll probably buy one of those advocate newspapers, as I really kind of do like LSU. Closing thoughts. Jay Johnson is an elite head coach. He does have the conversation of being the best coach in the SEC. Obviously, Tim Corbin's in that. Kevin O'Sullivan's in that. Jay Johnson has every argument to be at the top of that. LSU's never going to be out-schemed. They're never going to be out-recruited. They really aren't going to be out-hit or really out-pitched. They're going to have a lot of pitching talent. It's going to be, can they live up to expectations? And LSU has a ton of track records proven that say, hey, even though when you give us big expectations, we can always live up to them. And I think that this LSU team is going to be a fun one. I think Cade Beatty is going to be a household name. I think he's going to be a freshman All-American. That's my kind of bold prediction, is that he's a freshman All-American for him. Bear Jones is a first-team All-American. I know Perfect Game has him as a second-team preseason. I think it's a good bet that he's going to be a first-team one. Daniel Dixon, I think, has the potential. Dickinson has the potential to be the SEC Newcomer of the Year. If you were going to make me of Beatty, of Bear Jones being first team, of Daniel Dixon being the SEC Newcomer of the Year, I think he's going to be the SEC Newcomer of the Year. It's a tough award with all the guys that they brought into the portal. I think he's going to be the most talented. That's my dark horse pick to win SEC Newcomer of the Year. I believe that is going to be all we had time for, as we really do kind of try and keep these under 30 minutes. Next week, we have Mississippi State. I will have to double check that, and I'll get the graphic out later today. But Mississippi State, you're on the clock. See everybody next week.